The office clock ticked past midnight, but the fluorescent lights still buzzed, casting a sterile glow over Ethan Cole's desk. He was alone, or so he thought, until a cruel chuckle echoed from the break room, slicing through the silence. "Fairy boy's still here, working late to impress his boyfriend." A voice sneered, followed by laughter that felt like a punch to Ethan's gut. He froze, fingers hovering over his keyboard. At 27, Ethan had built a fragile armor against the taunts that dogged him at Pinnacle Marketing, a cutthroat firm in downtown Chicago. Being openly gay in a place where macho was a personality trait made him a target. But tonight, the words cut deeper. They always did when he was tired, when the world felt heavier than he could carry. He pushed his glasses up, took a shaky breath, and tried to focus on the campaign proposal due tomorrow. But the laughter lingered, a venomous reminder of why he kept his head down. Ethan wasn't always this guarded. Growing up in a small Illinois town, he dreamed of city lights and freedom, of a life where he could love without fear. Chicago was supposed to be that escape, but Pinnacle's toxic culture had turned his dream into a daily battle. His co-workers, led by Jake Russo, the golden boy of the sales team, never missed a chance to mock him. "Why don't you wear glitter to the next meeting, Ethan?" Jake had jeered once, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. The memory burned, but Ethan had learned to swallow his anger. He needed this job. Rent wasn't cheap, and his student loans wouldn't pay themselves. But tonight was different. As Ethan packed his bag to leave, he overheard Jake again, this time in the hallway with a few others. "Bet he's got a date with that barista guy from downstairs," Jake said, his voice dripping with disdain. "What's his name?" "Luke." Total cliché. The group laughed, and Ethan's chest tightened. Luke Harper, the barista at the cafe across the street, wasn't just a fling. He was the one person who made Ethan feel like he could breathe in this suffocating city. And now, even that felt tainted. Ethan's hands shook as he slung his bag over his shoulder. He wanted to storm into the hallway, to scream at Jake and his cronies, to make them feel the weight of their words. But fear stopped him, fear of losing his job, of being seen as too emotional, of proving them right. Instead, he slipped out the back exit, the cold Chicago wind slapping his face as he stepped into the night. Luke was waiting at their usual spot, a quiet bench under a flickering street lamp. At 25, Luke had an easy smile and warm brown eyes that made Ethan forget the world's sharp edges. "Rough day?" Luke asked, handing him a coffee. Ethan nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "They're just words," Luke said softly, his hand brushing Ethan's. "You're stronger than them." But Ethan didn't feel strong. He felt like a coward, shrinking under the weight of their hate. As they walked through the city, Luke's presence steadied him. They talked about everything and nothing: Luke's dream of opening his own cafe, Ethan's love for old jazz records. But the taunts from the office clung to Ethan like damp clothes. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was letting Luke down, letting himself down, by staying silent. "What if I can't keep doing this?" Ethan whispered, stopping under a bridge. Luke's face softened, but before he could answer, headlights flashed, and a car slowed nearby. Ethan tensed, instincts honed by years of vigilance. It was nothing, just a passerby, but it reminded him how exposed he felt, even with Luke by his side. Back at his apartment, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The proposal was done, But his mind churned with Jake's words, with the laughter, with the shame he couldn't outrun. He thought of his mom, who'd told him to be tough when he came out at 16. He thought of Luke, who deserved someone braver. And then, a spark of defiance flickered. What if he didn't stay silent? What if he fought back not with fists, but with something sharper? The idea was terrifying, exhilarating. For the first time in months, Ethan felt a pulse of hope. The next morning, he walked into Pinnacle with a plan forming. He wouldn't let Jake and his crew define him anymore. But how do you fight a culture that thrives on tearing you down? Ethan didn't know yet, but he was ready to find out. Ethan's desk was a fortress of papers and coffee cups, a chaotic shield against the office's hostility. He sat down, his heart racing as he opened his laptop. The plan from last night felt reckless in the harsh morning light, but he couldn't unsee the spark it had ignited. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, was fighting for Luke. For every moment they stole in the shadows, afraid of who might be watching. The office buzzed with its usual rhythm, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, and Jake's voice booming from the sales team's corner. Ethan caught snippets of their conversation, another jab at his expense. Something about his fancy scarves. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. His plan wasn't about confrontation. Not yet. It was about proving them wrong in a way they couldn't ignore. He'd been working on a pitch for a major client, a progressive nonprofit called Unity Now, which championed inclusivity. If he could nail this, it wouldn't just be a win for his career, it would be a statement. Ethan spent the morning refining his presentation, weaving in data and visuals that screamed competence. Unity Now's campaign needed to resonate with young, diverse audiences, and Ethan knew exactly how to make that happen. He'd grown up feeling invisible. He understood what it meant to crave representation. By noon, he had a draft that felt like a piece of himself, bold, authentic, unapologetic. But doubt crept in. What if his coworkers sabotaged him? Jake had a knack for stealing credit, and Ethan's supervisor, Karen, rarely noticed his contributions. He needed an ally. During lunch, he slipped downstairs to the cafe where Luke was steaming milk behind the counter. The sight of him, hair messy, apron dusted with coffee grounds, eased Ethan's nerves. "I'm going for it," Ethan said, leaning across the counter. "The Unity pitch. I'm going to show them I'm not who they think I am." Luke's eyes lit up. "That's my guy?" he said, squeezing Ethan's hand. "You've got this. And if they don't see it, they're blind." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the weight of the office's judgment loomed large. Luke sensed it. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice. "You're not alone in this. I'm with you. Every step." Ethan nodded, clinging to those words like a lifeline. Back at Pinnacle, the afternoon dragged. Ethan overheard Jake pitching his own idea to Karen. Something flashy but shallow. All style and no substance. It was classic Jake, charming enough to skate by. Ethan's stomach churned, but he channeled it into his work. He stayed late again, perfecting every slide, every word. By 10 p.m., his eyes burned, but the presentation was a masterpiece. He emailed it to Karen with a note. "I'd love to present this to Unity Now myself. I believe in this campaign." The next day, Karen called him into her office. Ethan's pulse raced as he sat across from her, expecting criticism. Instead, she looked impressed. This is strong. Ethan, she said, tapping his proposal. You're presenting tomorrow. Don't let me down. It was a rare moment of validation. But Ethan knew better than to celebrate early. Jake wouldn't let this go quietly. Sure enough, as Ethan left Karen's office, Jake cornered him by the copier. Heard you're pitching to Unity, he said, smirking. Hope you don't choke. Princess. The word stung, but Ethan met his gaze. I won't, he said, his voice steady for the first time in months. Jake's smirk faltered, just for a second, and Ethan felt a surge of power. He wasn't invisible anymore. That night, Luke came over, bringing takeout and a playlist of Ethan's favorite jazz. They sat on the couch, talking through the presentation. Luke wasn't just supportive, he was strategic, pointing out ways to handle tough questions. You're not just selling a campaign, Luke said. You're selling yourself. Show them who you are. Ethan leaned into him, grateful for the warmth of his presence. For the first time, he felt like he could do this. But as he lay in bed later, doubt returned. What if the pitch failed? What if Jake undermined him? The office wasn't just a workplace, it was a battlefield. And Ethan was walking into it unarmed. Still, he closed his eyes and pictured Luke's smile. The one thing that made the fight worth it. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and ambition. Ethan stood at the front, his palms sweaty as he connected his laptop to the projector. Unity Now's representatives, three sharply dressed women with kind but discerning eyes, sat across from Karen and a few senior colleagues. Jake lounged in the back, arms crossed, his smirk a silent challenge. Ethan took a deep breath, picturing Luke's steady gaze. This was his moment. Good morning, Ethan began, his voice stronger than he felt. Unity Now's mission is to amplify voices that are too often silenced. This campaign does that. He clicked to his first slide. A vibrant collage of diverse faces, each with a story to tell. The room leaned in, and Ethan felt a spark of confidence. He spoke with passion, weaving data with personal anecdotes about growing up feeling other. He didn't mention being gay outright, wasn't the place, but the subtext was clear. His authenticity resonated. The Unity reps nodded, scribbling notes. Karen's expression softened, a rare sign of approval. But Jake's presence loomed like a storm cloud. Halfway through, he interrupted. Great visuals, Ethan. But isn't this a bit niche? We need mass appeal. His tone was slick, calculated to undermine. Ethan's heart pounded, but he didn't flinch. Actually, Jake, he said, meeting his eyes, inclusivity is mass appeal. Studies show 70% of Gen Z prioritize brands that champion diversity. He clicked to a slide with the data, his voice steady. This campaign targets them without alienating others. It's universal. The Unity reps exchanged impressed glances, and Jake's smirk faded. Ethan finished strong, earning a round of applause, small but genuine. Afterward, one of the reps, a woman named Maria, approached him. That was powerful, she said. You get it. We'd like to move forward. Ethan's chest swelled, but he kept his composure. Thank you. I'm honored. As the reps left, Karen pulled him aside. Good work, she said. You've got potential. It was the most praise he'd ever gotten from her. But the victory was short-lived. In the hallway, Jake and his crew were waiting. "Nice show, Cole," Jake said, his voice low. "But don't get cocky. You're still the office freak." The words hit like a slap. But Ethan didn't back down. "Keep talking, Jake," he said. "It's all you're good for." He walked away, heart racing, feeling the weight of his own defiance. That evening, Luke met him outside the office, his grin wide. "You killed it, didn't you?" he asked, pulling Ethan into a hug. Ethan laughed, the tension melting away. "I didn't choke," he said, and they both laughed, the sound echoing in the empty street. Over dinner at a quiet diner, Ethan recounted every detail, from Jake's interruption to Maria's praise. Luke listened, his pride palpable. "You're changing the game," he said. "They can't ignore you now." But Ethan knew it wasn't over. Jake's resentment was a ticking bomb, and the office's culture wouldn't shift overnight. Still, he felt a shift in himself. He wasn't just surviving anymore, was fighting. Luke reached across the table, his hand warm over Ethan's. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." Ethan nodded, his heart full. For the first time, he believed it. Back at home, Ethan started sketching ideas for the next phase of the Unity campaign. He wanted it to be bigger, bolder, something that would force Pinnacle to confront its own biases. But as he worked, his phone buzzed with an email from Karen. "Client wants you to lead the campaign. Meeting tomorrow." Ethan stared at the screen, a mix of pride and dread washing over him. Leading meant more visibility, more responsibility, and more of Jake's wrath. He called Luke, needing his voice. "This is huge," Luke said, excitement in his tone. "But be careful. Jake's not going to let this go." Ethan knew he was right. The fight was just beginning, and he'd need every ounce of courage to face what was coming. Leading the Unity campaign was a dream and a minefield. Ethan sat in his apartment, surrounded by notes and mock-ups, the weight of his new role pressing down. He'd always wanted to make a difference, but now that he had the chance, the stakes felt impossibly high. Pinnacle's office was a pressure cooker, and Jake's resentment was simmering just below the surface. The next morning, Ethan walked into the planning meeting with a mix of nerves and determination. The Unity team was there, along with Karen and a few colleagues, including Jake, who sat with his arms crossed, eyes cold. Ethan outlined his vision, a multimedia campaign with real stories from marginalized communities, including queer voices. "We'll use social media to amplify these stories," he said, "and partner with influencers who live these truths." Maria from Unity nodded enthusiastically, but Jake scoffed. "Sounds like a pride parade," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Ethan's face burned, but he kept his voice calm. "It's about connection, Jake. People want brands that reflect their values." Maria chimed in, "He's right. This is exactly what we're looking for." Jake's jaw tightened, and Ethan felt a small victory. But he knew better than to gloat. Jake wasn't the type to let a slight go unanswered. Over the next week, Ethan threw himself into the campaign. He interviewed community members, collaborated with designers, and spent late nights crafting content. Luke was his rock, bringing him coffee during marathon work sessions and reading drafts at 2 a.m. "You're building something real," Luke said one night. his voice soft. I'm proud of you. Ethan kissed him, grateful for the reminder that this fight wasn't just about proving himself, it was about creating a world where they could exist without fear. But trouble was brewing. Ethan noticed files on his shared drive were being altered, small changes, like typos or shifted numbers, enough to make him look sloppy. He suspected Jake, but had no proof. When he brought it up to Karen, she brushed it off. Mistakes happen, she said. Double-check your work. Ethan's frustration grew, but he didn't back down. He started saving backups obsessively, documenting every step. One evening, as Ethan was leaving the office, he found a sticky note on his monitor. Watch your back. Fairy. The word stung, but the threat felt real. He showed it to Luke, who was furious. You need to report this, Luke said, pacing. This is harassment. Ethan hesitated. Reporting it could escalate things, and he wasn't sure Karen would back him up. I'll handle it my way, he said, though he wasn't sure how. The next day, Ethan overheard Jake bragging about a prank in the break room. It was the confirmation he needed. He started keeping a log of every incident, every taunt, every altered file, every note. If Jake wanted a fight, Ethan would be ready. But the stress was taking a toll. He was sleeping less, snapping at Luke over small things. One night, after a tense argument about Ethan's long hours, Luke grabbed his hand. You're killing yourself over this, he said. You don't have to prove anything to them. I'm proving it to myself. Ethan shot back, then softened. And to you. I want us to have a future where we don't have to hide. Luke's eyes glistened, and he pulled Ethan close. We already have that, he whispered. But I'll fight with you. Always. Ethan doubled down on the campaign, pouring his heart into every detail. He was close to finishing when Karen called him into her office. The client loves your work, she said. But Jake's raised concerns about your focus. He says you're distracted. Ethan's blood boiled. Jake was playing dirty, and Karen was listening. I'm not distracted, Ethan said firmly. I'm committed. Check my backups if you don't believe me. Karen raised an eyebrow, but nodded. I will. As Ethan left her office, he knew the real battle was coming. Jake wasn't just mocking him anymore, he was trying to destroy him. But Ethan wasn't the same scared kid who'd walked into Pinnacle a year ago. He was ready to fight back. And this time, he wouldn't hold back. Ethan's world was a tightrope, and every step felt like it could send him crashing. The Unity campaign was nearing its launch, but Jake's sabotage was relentless. Files went missing. Deadlines were accidentally changed in the system, and whispers about Ethan's incompetence spread through the office. He documented everything, his log now a thick file of evidence. But it wasn't enough. He needed to expose Jake without sinking to his level. One morning, Ethan arrived to find his desk rearranged, papers scattered. A photo of him and Luke turned face down. His stomach churned, but he refused to let it shake him. He spent the day rebuilding what was lost, his focus razor sharp. At lunch, he met Luke at the cafe, his hands trembling as he recounted the latest incident. This is beyond harassment, Luke said, his voice tight with anger. You can't keep taking this. Ethan looked at him, torn. If I quit, they win, he said. I need to finish this campaign. For us. Luke's expression softened. but worry lingered in his eyes. "Just promise me you'll be careful," he said. Ethan nodded. But careful wasn't enough anymore. He needed a plan. That night, he stayed late, combing through the shared drive's access logs. There it was, Jake's user ID, time-stamped on every altered file. It was the proof he needed, but presenting it would mean war. He saved the logs, his heart pounding with the weight of what came next. The next day, Ethan pitched the final campaign to Unity Now. The room was packed. Karen, the Unity team, and Jake, who sat with a smug grin. Ethan's slides were flawless, his delivery electric. He shared stories of queer youth who'd inspired the campaign, their courage fueling his own. The Unity reps were visibly moved, one wiping away a tear. When Ethan finished, the room erupted in applause. Maria stood up. "This is groundbreaking," she said. "We're ready to sign." Karen beamed, but Jake's face was stone. After the meeting, Jake cornered Ethan in the hallway. "You think you're untouchable now," he hissed. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Ethan met his gaze, unflinching. "I've got proof of what you've been doing," he said quietly. "Back off, or I go to HR." Jake's eyes widened, but he laughed it off. "You've got nothing," he said, but his voice wavered. Ethan didn't go to HR not yet. He wanted to finish the campaign first, to prove he could rise above the sabotage. But the stress was wearing him down. He and Luke argued more, small tensions erupting over late nights and missed dinners. One night, Ethan snapped, "Why can't you just let me do this?" Luke looked hurt but stood his ground. "Because I'm scared for you," he said. "This place is breaking you." Ethan wanted to argue, but he saw the truth in Luke's eyes. He was fighting for their future, but at what cost? The campaign launched a week later, a resounding success. Social media buzzed with praise, and Unity Now's hashtag trended nationally. Ethan's name was attached to it all, a beacon of his talent. Karen called him into her office, her tone warmer than ever. "You've outdone yourself," she said. "The client wants you on their next project." Ethan smiled, but his mind was on Jake. He handed Karen his log of evidence. "I need you to see this," he said. "Jake's been sabotaging me for months." Karen's face hardened as she skimmed the pages. "This is serious," she said. "I'll handle it." Ethan nodded, but he didn't trust her to act decisively. Jake had too much sway, too many allies. That night, Luke held him as he vented. "You did the right thing," Luke said. "But you need to protect yourself now." Ethan knew he was right. The campaign was a win, but the war wasn't over. As he lay awake, Ethan realized he couldn't keep fighting alone. He needed to take a stand, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever felt crushed by a place like Pinnacle. The thought was terrifying, but it was also freeing. He wasn't just Ethan Cole anymore, was someone who could change things. The office felt like a cage, its walls closing in with every passing day. Ethan's campaign had made waves, but the victory was bittersweet. Karen had promised to look into Jake's sabotage, but a week passed with no action. Ethan wasn't surprised. Pinnacle's culture thrived on favoritism, and Jake was the poster boy for it. Still, Ethan kept his head high, refusing to let the silence break him. He threw himself into the next phase of the Unity campaign. But the harassment didn't stop. Anonymous notes appeared in his desk drawer, crude insults, veiled threats. He added them to his log. But the weight of it all was crushing. Luke noticed the change in him. The way Ethan's smile faded. His shoulders slumped. One night, as they sat on Ethan's couch, Luke took his hand. "You don't have to stay," he said. "You're bigger than this place." Ethan wanted to believe him, but leaving felt like defeat. "I can't let them win," he said, his voice breaking. Luke's eyes softened. "You're not letting them win by choosing yourself," he said. "You're winning by living your truth." The words hit hard, planting a seed Ethan wasn't ready to face. He kissed Luke, clinging to the one person who saw him clearly. At work, Ethan started noticing allies. Sarah, a quiet designer, slipped him a note. "I saw what Jake did to your files. I'm with you." It was small, but it gave Ethan hope. He began talking to others, carefully, building a network of support. Some, like Sarah, had seen Jake's behavior. Others had their own stories of being sidelined. Ethan realized he wasn't alone. Pinnacle's toxicity hurt more than just him. One afternoon, Ethan overheard Jake in the break room, bragging about putting Cole in his place. It was the final straw. Ethan didn't confront him. Instead, he went to HR, armed with his log, the access logs, and the notes. The HR manager, a stern woman named Diane, listened quietly as he laid it all out. "These are serious allegations," she said. "We'll investigate." Ethan nodded, but he knew investigations could be buried. He needed a bigger move. That night, he and Luke brainstormed over pizza. "What if you go public?" Luke suggested. "Not just about Jake, but the whole culture." Ethan froze. Going public meant risking everything: his job, his reputation. But it also meant taking control. He spent the night drafting a post for a professional networking site, detailing his experience at Pinnacle without naming names. He described the harassment, the sabotage, the toll it took. "This isn't just my story," he wrote. "It's the story of anyone who's ever been made to feel less than." He hesitated, his finger hovering over the post button. Luke sat beside him, his presence steadying. "You're ready," he said. Ethan clicked, and the post went live. By morning, it had hundreds of shares, comments pouring in from others with similar stories. Ethan's phone buzzed with messages, some supportive, some vicious. But he felt lighter, like he'd finally exhaled. At work, the fallout was immediate. Colleagues whispered, some avoiding his gaze, others offering quiet support. Karen called him into her office, her face pale. "Your post is causing a stir," she said. "The board's asking questions." Ethan held her gaze. "Good," he said. "They should." For the first time, he saw unease in her eyes. The power dynamic was shifting. But Jake wasn't done. He stormed up to Ethan's desk, face red. "You think you can ruin me?" he shouted. The office went silent. Ethan stood, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not ruining you, Jake. You did that yourself." Jake lunged forward, but Sarah stepped in, her voice sharp. "Back off, Jake. We're done with this." Others nodded, and Jake faltered, outnumbered. That night, Ethan and Luke celebrated quietly. a bottle of wine between them. The fight wasn't over. But Ethan had drawn a line. He wasn't just surviving anymore, was rewriting the rules. And for the first time, he felt like he could win. Ethan's post was a wildfire, spreading beyond Pinnacle to industry forums and local news. Colleagues from other firms reached out, sharing their own stories of workplace hostility. Unity Now's team emailed him, praising his courage and offering a freelance contract for their next project. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. But the office was a battlefield now. Jake had been suspended pending investigation. But his allies still glared at Ethan, their whispers sharper than ever. Karen called a team meeting to address the culture. Ethan sat in the back, arms crossed, as she spoke about inclusivity and moving forward. It felt hollow, a corporate bandage on a gaping wound. Sarah caught his eye, her expression skeptical. Afterward, she pulled him aside. "They're covering their asses," she said. "But you've got people behind you. Keep pushing." Ethan nodded, grateful for her solidarity. He spent the week balancing the Unity campaign with the fallout from his post. Reporters reached out, and he gave a cautious interview to a local blog, focusing on systemic issues rather than personal grudges. The article went viral, and Pinnacle's board announced an external audit of workplace practices. Ethan knew it was partly PR, but it was a start. Still, the stress was relentless. He barely slept, his dreams haunted by Jake's sneer and the fear of losing everything. Luke was his anchor. One night, as they walked along Lake Michigan, Ethan broke down. "What if this destroys me?" he asked, his voice raw. Luke stopped, turning him to face the water. "You're not being destroyed," he said. "You're building something. You're making it easier for the next person." Ethan leaned into him, the wind cold but Luke's warmth grounding. "I couldn't do this without you," he whispered. Luke smiled. "Good thing you don't have to." Back at work, Ethan noticed a shift. Some colleagues who'd stayed silent now nodded at him in the halls. A junior intern, a shy kid named Mia, approached him. "I'm queer too," she said quietly. "What you did, it matters." Ethan's throat tightened. He hadn't realized how much his fight was resonating, how it was giving others courage. But the investigation dragged. Diane from HR updated him. Jake had denied everything, and the evidence was inconclusive. Ethan wasn't surprised, but it stung. He knew Pinnacle would protect its own. That night, he and Luke talked it over. "You could sue," Luke said, but Ethan shook his head. A lawsuit would drain him, and he wanted more than revenge. He wanted change. He started planning his exit. Unity Now's freelance offer was a lifeline, and Luke encouraged him to take it. "You could start your own consultancy," Luke said, eyes bright. "You've got the talent, the vision. Why stay here?" The idea was daunting but thrilling. Ethan spent nights researching, drafting a business plan. He wasn't ready to leave yet, but the possibility felt like freedom. Then came a breakthrough. Sarah forwarded him an email chain she'd been accidentally CC'd on Jake, admitting to a colleague that he'd messed with Ethan's files to teach him a lesson. It was the smoking gun Ethan needed. He forwarded it to Diane and Karen, his heart pounding. The next day, Jake was fired. The news spread like wildfire, and the office buzzed with shock. Ethan felt no joy, only relief. The fight had taken so much, but he'd won this round. That evening, Luke took him to their favorite jazz club, a cozy spot with flickering candles. As the music swelled, Ethan felt the weight lift. Just a little. You did it, Luke said, raising a glass. Ethan shook his head. We did it, he said, and they clinked glasses. The sound a small victory in a long war. But Ethan knew the real work was just beginning. Pinnacle was changing. Slowly. But he wasn't sure he could stay. The future was uncertain. But with Luke by his side and a spark of courage in his chest, he was ready to face it. Ethan stood at a crossroads, the Chicago skyline glittering outside his window. Jake was gone, but Pinnacle's scars lingered. The audit had forced new policies, mandatory inclusivity training, a stricter harassment protocol, but Ethan felt the change was surface deep. He'd won a battle, but the war for a truly safe workplace was far from over. Still, he wasn't the same person who'd cowered under Jake's taunts. He'd found his voice, and he wasn't giving it back. Unity Now's freelance contract was a beacon. Ethan spent weeks negotiating terms, balancing it with his Pinnacle workload. The client loved his vision, and the Project a National campaign celebrating queer resilience felt like a calling. He poured himself into it, working from Luke's cafe during the day, surrounded by the hum of espresso machines and Luke's encouraging smiles. You're glowing, Luke said one afternoon, watching Ethan sketch ideas. Ethan laughed. That's just the caffeine. But he knew it was more. He was building something that mattered. At Pinnacle, the atmosphere was tense but shifting. Sarah and Mia became his allies, collaborating on projects and calling out subtle slights in meetings. Others followed, emboldened by Ethan's stand. Karen, sensing the tide turning, gave him more responsibility. But Ethan saw through her. She was playing politics, not principle. He started quietly job hunting, sending feelers to firms with better cultures. He wasn't running, was choosing his battles. One evening, Ethan and Luke attended a Unity Now event, a fundraiser showcasing the campaign. Ethan's work was everywhere: posters, videos, stories of people like him, their voices amplified. Attendees approached him, thanking him for his courage. A young man, barely 20, shared how Ethan's story had given him hope. Ethan's eyes welled up, and Luke squeezed his hand. This is why you fought, Luke whispered. Ethan nodded, his heart full. Back at Pinnacle, Ethan made his decision. He drafted a resignation letter, not out of defeat, but strength. I'm grateful for the opportunities, he wrote, but I need a workplace that aligns with my values. He included a list of recommendations: better HR oversight, anonymous reporting, real accountability. He didn't expect Pinnacle to change overnight, but he wanted his exit to leave a mark. On his last day, he walked into the office with his head high. Colleagues whispered, some offering quiet goodbyes, others avoiding his gaze. Sarah hugged him, promising to keep in touch. Mia slipped him a note. You changed everything. Thank you. Ethan tucked it into his pocket, a reminder of what he'd accomplished. Karen shook his hand, her smile tight. You'll be missed, she said. But Ethan knew she was relieved to see him go. He didn't care. He was free. That night, Luke threw a small party at the cafe, inviting Sarah, Mia, and a few friends. The space glowed with string lights, jazz filling the air. Luke raised a toast to Ethan, who fought for himself and all of us. Everyone cheered, and Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Luke, his anchor through it all, and knew he'd made the right choice. Months later, Ethan launched his own consultancy, specializing in inclusive campaigns. Unity now was his first client, and others followed, drawn to his authenticity. He worked from Luke's cafe, their lives intertwined in ways that felt like home. Pinnacle faded into memory, a chapter closed but not forgotten. Ethan had fought back, not with anger, but with courage and love. He'd left the office in shock, not because he'd burned it down, but because he'd shown them what was possible. As he and Luke walked through Chicago one starry night, Ethan felt the weight of his past lift. The city no longer felt like a battlefield, it was his canvas, his story. He squeezed Luke's hand, their future unwritten but bright. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice steady. Luke smiled, pulling him close. "Yeah," he said, "and we're just getting started."